event for Bob. So the first time was a couple years ago on Mercer Island when he was running for governor. It was with a group of Mercer Island residents, and we got together at Daniel Becker's home. Daniel Becker is our Mercer Island deputy mayor now, and on the city council of Mercer Island. So if you want to win your election, you have to support and host an event for Bob. Okay. So tonight is not only an opportunity to come together as friends, neighbors, and community members, but also a chance to recognize a leader whose dedication to public service has had a profound impact on the people of Washington State. Throughout his years of service, first as Washington's Attorney General and now as our governor, Governor Ferguson has demonstrated an unwavering commitment to protecting the rights, freedoms, and the well-being of Washington families and communities. He has consistently stood as a strong and principled defender of both our state and federal constitutions, guided by a deep belief in democracy, justice, and the rule of law. At a time when our nation faces significant political, social, and economic challenges, Governor Ferguson's leadership has remained steady, thoughtful, and courageous, whether advocating for our consumers, safeguarding our civil rights, and protecting our environment, or defending Washington's interests on the national stage. He has shown a willingness to lead with integrity and conviction, even in the most difficult moments. His vision for a thriving civic life, strong institutions, and a healthy, forward-looking future for Washington continues to inspire our communities across our state. The work he does each day reflects a belief that government can and should serve the people with fairness, accountability, and compassion. This evening, by gathering together in support of his work, we also affirm our own shared commitment to civic engagement, democratic values, and the enduring strength of community. So it's truly an honor to welcome him here tonight. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Governor Bob Ferguson.
But honestly, I don't know if anyone's quite as beautiful in terms of, right? I sometimes take a picture here, but what's in the background? You have to worry here, something beautiful in the background wherever you're taking a picture here. So thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for such a great turnout of folks coming out to chat for a few minutes about the future of the state of Washington. And I know it's literally one of the most beautiful days of the year so far, and you have a lot of ways to spend a beautiful day in Washington State, and the fact that you're all spending it here, I deeply, deeply appreciate. One quick thing on a lot of you have asked how it's going with our kids. We have twins who are seniors in high school, Jack and Katie, so Colleen and I will be empty nesters in about, 4 months or something. So if any of you have been through that experience, I'm taking advice on how to deal with being an empty nester. Both kids gone at the same time. I'll be leaving.
They come back.
They come back. They come back. I'll take your word for that. And,
Maybe live with you.
and they're out. That's right. They're out for college next year, and after this event, I'll be changing clothes and heading up to a gym up in Bothell. My daughter is a big softball player, some of you know. She'll be playing college softball next year, so I'll be catching her fastballs and doing batting practice with her up in Bothell from this event. So we're enjoying the last months we have here at the home and before things change. Okay, one thing I want to mention before I get to a few remarks, and happy to take a couple questions. There's always big elections on the ballot every year. There certainly are no exception this year, but I think it's fair to say this year in Washington State, an especially significant set of elections are our state Supreme Court. We have, if memory's correct, Roger Goodman will correct me, five spots, right? 5 spots on the state Supreme Court. And what's unusual about that is there's an unusual combination of either open seats, as in a justice has retired and is not running again, so you get that rare open seat. And also there are 2 spots of individuals where a justice resigned before the end of their term, and I, as governor, had the privilege of appointing the new Supreme Court justice. So these are 2 individuals who just got appointed literally in the last couple of months, and now immediately have to run to stay on the court. And so all these races are important, but I have a special fondness for the 2 individuals I appointed, as you might imagine. So their names are, I know there's a lot of names, but the first is Colleen Melody. And just real briefly, Colleen, Julie mentioned the work, as Attorney General and the work we've done there. Colleen Melody was a key person in that work. became Attorney General, we did not do any civil rights work. When I became Attorney General, we did not do civil rights work on behalf of the people. It seems hard to believe, right? Hundreds and hundreds of lawyers, but if you called our office in 2013 with a civil rights complaint, we referred you somewhere else. Hard to believe. So I decided to create a civil rights division. The first person I hired was Colleen Melody. She was a civil rights attorney back at the Department of Justice, back when it was the Department of Justice, right, back in Washington State. And she came out and I said, hey, we're gonna build this thing, you're gonna build this thing, I wanna have the best civil rights division in the country. That division is now probably 40 individuals. She built that up, and a lot of that work we've done against the Trump administration, it's a team effort, of course, but Colleen is a pivotal person. That's why I appointed her to the Supreme Court. So Colleen Melody on the Supreme Court, she'll be on the ballot. And number two, for the second appointment, a gentleman by the name of Theo Angelis, like Angel Angelis, Theo Angelis. Also someone I've known for a long time, fantastic lawyer, well-respected lawyer, just a really brilliant guy, just like Colleen, shares our values, I think is more than fair to say. Both of them have challenges. They've got folks who different perspectives. So I just really encourage you to take a look at those two in particular, Colleen Melody and Theo Angelis. So thanks for thinking about them as you go to vote this year. Okay, so a few comments. So first, on a beautiful night like this, in a beautiful spot like this, I hesitate to mention the following two words, but we gotta talk about Donald Trump, okay? We gotta do it. We gotta do it. And so, look, I never thought, as an American, I would ever see individuals in masks getting out of unmarked cars and plucking people off our streets on their way to school, on their way to church, on their way to work, on their way to just living their dang lives, right? Deeply un-American. And that's just one of 100,000 examples we could all talk about, right? We see it all the time. And so, you know, we have threats to our democracy right now, like we have not seen in a very long time. And so it's really incumbent upon all of us to do everything we can, whatever our role is in life, and I know you're all doing that. One thing I want to say is we are trying to defend our values as a state and take on what's happening in DC. Is what I really want to emphasize is no state in the country is doing more to push back against this administration than Washington State. That's just a fact. Doing more than any other state. Look, and it's not an accident that in 2017, his first term, the first state to take on Donald Trump in court, and the first state to beat him in court, filed right here in Washington State. Washington State. I was AG back then, right? First one to do it. 2020, thank you. In 2025, with our new excellent Attorney General, Nick Brown, who now heads that fantastic office, the first state to take on Donald Trump in court, first state to beat him in court, happened right here in Washington State again. That's not an accident, everybody, okay? That's a lot of hardworking, smart people thinking about what to do, anticipating what to do, and using the tools that we have to push back and to win over and over again. And look, sometimes we can file a lawsuit, sometimes we have to prepare for who knows what they're going to be doing. But one thing I just really want to emphasize is a decent chunk of my life every day is thinking about what's going on in Washington, D.C., doing the best we can to prepare for what might be happening, to work with the team, to work with our partners in the legislature and local government and community leaders all across the state to do everything we can. And, you know, my job as governor is to, in a nutshell, during this time, defend our values, right? Because one thing I know for sure, in 10, 50, 100 years, when people look back at this time, I want people to feel confident that Washington State did everything we could to stand up to what's going on. It's never been the need of what's going on. I could give you example after example. We have a great law in Washington State, thanks to the leadership of our legislators. We have some legislators here tonight called the Keep Washington Working Act. It's a really good example of this. We're one of just a very few number of states that have this law. And it's a law that says, bipartisan law by the way, that says our local law enforcement should focus on local law enforcement and are not allowed to cooperate with ICE in any way. They don't participate in raids on workplaces. They don't coordinate with ICE. They don't share information with them about where someone's staying or living or going to school. We don't allow that. They focus on local law enforcement. Very few states have this law. Well, you all remember Pam Bondi. Remember her, Pam Bondi, right? Former Attorney General of the United States, right? She sent me a letter literally saying that I needed to get rid of the Keep Washington Working Act. And if not, she literally threatened me. She wrote a lengthy letter with criminal sanctions, which I realize in the outrage scale compared to other things, it's just one more thing, but it's worth pausing, right? The U.S. Attorney General in charge of the Department of Justice writing to a democratically elected governor who has a completely constitutional law and threatening criminal sanctions if we don't undo that law. It's breathtaking. And so look, about 99.9% of the letters I get, my team of course drafts and sends out the response. I get thousands of them. When I got that letter, I said to my team, I'm writing this response myself. So I won't read it to you, it's about 3 pages long, but I can summarize my answer to her demand that I get rid of this law in 2 words. I said basically, hell no. Hell no, we're not doing it. That's not going to happen in Washington State, right? We defend our values in the face of those kind of threats and those kinds of bullying. So I know we all need to work together, and we're all doing that work, and I appreciate everything all of you do in this really important time that's facing our state. Next, what I want to say is it's of course not enough, although it's critically important, to simply stand up to what's going on in DC, right? That doesn't move our state forward proactively, it just keeps bad things from happening to us. Critically important for the civil rights of Washingtonians, for the programs we want to support, but we have to do that while at the same time moving our state forward, right? And Julie, you mentioned some things, areas where we're moving our state forward. I'm just going to take through a few things because my goal as governor is, while standing up to what's going on in DC, is make sure that we're walking and chewing gum at the same time. They are moving forward, and it's a challenging time for us as a state. You all know the budget challenges, you all know the economy, you know where gas prices are with that war going on. There's a lot of big challenges. And I'm going to move quickly through these issues, but I just want to give you a sense of where we're trying to go. One thing I just deeply believe in is making sure our government works for the people of Washington State, that we show government that works. We're not going to be perfect. We're not going to get everything right, but we're moving forward on a range of issues. I'm going to take through a few. Housing. When I ran for governor, I went to all 39 counties. The issue I heard the most was the need for more housing. Housing of all kinds. Shelter for the homeless to more affordable housing. Red jurisdictions, blue jurisdictions, big cities, smaller towns, more affordable housing. And look, we have stepped up as a state with the legislature and the community groups. In the last 2 sessions, I've signed probably 40 laws, maybe more, right, to address this issue, to streamline our processes to build housing. We've made record investments in this last 2 years in our budget with groups to build more housing all across our state. And look, there's no one bill that's going to solve that problem. There's no one investment that's going to solve it. But we need to move forward on building more housing to make our state more affordable. And the legislature's done a great job. It's been a great partnership moving forward on addressing that. Number 2, our infrastructure. We rank, I think, like 48th in the country for our infrastructure, the state of our roads and the state of our bridges. That's not the kind of ranking we want as a state. So in the last budget, I proposed making really record investments, billions of dollars through a bonding process to fix those bridges, to get our roads fixed. It's not the most glamorous thing. And as elected official, I love a new project and ribbon cutting as much as anybody. But we have to take care of our basics, right? We have to take care of our basics. And candidly, for too long, we have not been doing that. I'm super pleased the legislature funded that. We're going to be starting here in a matter of weeks with those projects all across the state to really deliver infrastructure that we need all across the state. Because, look, we've closed bridges, even in my short time as governor. When I go talk to those communities that are impacted by bridge closure, because it's just worn down, it's years past its useful life, huge impact on businesses, huge impacts on people who have to detour 30 miles around to get to their work, to get to see their doctor, to get their kid to school. And so that is something I feel very strongly about. Part of the infrastructure is our ferries, as far as just one example. Look, our ferry system's been in crisis, but with a lot of work, we have great leadership with the ferry system. We've now, for the first time since pre-COVID, returned to full domestic service for our ferry fleet. Now it's fragile. Too many of those vessels are too old, but thanks again to our legislature, we funded 3 new vessels, electric vessels, by the way. We're going to modernize that fleet. That's good for climate. We invested that in our budget last year. This last summer, 2 summers ago, we had more than 600 cancellations because we didn't have sufficient crew. We weren't investing in our crew, right? So the vessel's there, but not the crew. Last summer, 1 summer later, we reduced that to less than 200. That's the progress people want to see, right? People understand you're not going to be perfect, but we want to make those investments in our people, in our workforce, and infrastructure, so people can live here in Washington State, businesses can thrive. That's going to be important. One more thing I want to mention along these lines. Look, we as a state need to do a lot better job at streamlining our permitting and licensing process. Whether that's building housing. Look, if you're waiting for your permit to build, that's money to you. And guess what? That housing's not getting built. It's a double whammy for everybody. And we have in the state, and this is an area that I have some control over. I have agencies that I can communicate to and have them change how they do things. So I signed an executive order consistent. Every agency that issues a permit or a license, it could be to be a security guard, right? You need your license to do that. It can be building. You get the whole range of things. That we need to streamline those processes to go faster on doing this. I can give you dozens and dozens of examples, but it's just one of the progress we're making. If you want to work in behavioral health, help people with addiction issues, pretty important job in our state, right? It took, I can't remember exactly, it was like 5 months to get your license. 5 months. We had reports of people saying, I gotta move some, I got a job offer in Oregon, sorry, I gotta go, I can't wait around. We've got that down now just a few weeks. And that is on permit and license after permit and license. We're streamlining those processes. That's good for our economy, that's good for the people, but it's also good for confidence in government. To show again that our government can work and can improve, and we're changing the way we do things over and over. Climate, we see in DC rolling back on climate, and that's putting it mildly. That big bad betrayal of the bill, right? All the tax credits have been eliminated, right? The total withdrawal from us being a world leader on addressing climate. But thankfully in Washington State, thanks to our legislature again for adopting the Climate Commitment Act, we're making investments. Thanks to all of you, the voters, when they tried to overturn that at the polls, I think it was 62% of the voters said, yeah, we like the Climate Commitment Act, thank you very much, right? That's what we want in Washington State. So we're still able in Washington to truly lead the country on making these investments to electrify our ferry fleet. And that to me is exciting that we're able to do that in Washington State. A key part of that though is we need to do a better job of siting and permitting for clean energy projects. Once again, we rank like 49th amongst the states on getting those projects built. That meeting after meeting on trying to break through, and one thing we noticed was in that big bad betrayal of the bill, there's a whole series of huge tax credits that were going to go away in a year. So we identified about 17 projects that are already in the system and said, we realized we're going to lose those projects if they can get to completion of their process by that deadline, because they're going to lose a key part of their funding. So we put together a team that's essentially looking at each one of those 17 projects to make sure we're moving it through the system as quickly as possible. Good news is, just got the report, they're all moving through. Those projects are moving, they're going to meet that deadline so they can go forward. That's the kind of thing we need to do as a state, more and more, is to show that we're moving forward. Maybe one last one, then I'll take a couple questions. I could go on, but on the rights that are under attack, reproductive freedom. You all know what's going on in the world with Roe v. Wade and everything else. In that big bad betrayal of the bill, I can give you 100 examples of things that are in there that are disastrous, but in there was a line in that big bad betrayal of the bill that defunded organizations that met a very specific criteria. And guess what? Only one organization met the definition. Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood, right? Planned Parenthood. The only one. They just targeted Planned Parenthood. Well, look, I forget the amount. It was $15 million or something like that for the Washington State Planned Parenthood, something like $18 million. We've got enough challenges with reproductive freedom going on with the reversal of Roe v. Wade. Tack that on, we were really going to have folks losing access to that, even here in Washington State. So we've got budget challenges, but look, the next day when that came out, we had a press conference with legislative leaders, reproductive rights leaders, and said, we're going to back up that in Washington State. We're going to prioritize that to make sure that Planned Parenthood stays whole. You know what's great about that? I've heard from leaders in Planned Parenthood saying, that puts pressure on other Democrat governors to do the same thing, right? And so I've heard from Democrat governors saying, hey, we heard you did that. Is that right? Absolutely. So we're not just leading here, but it has a ripple effect all across the country as well. So look, I just want to wrap up where I started, which, thanks to all of you for being here. I'm the only governor in the country that does not accept political donations from large corporations or corporate PACs. The only one in the whole country. And I'm proud of that. But it is not the easy way to raise the millions of dollars you have to raise to run a real campaign for governor. And I'm only able to do that, honestly, because in the campaign in 2024, we had more than 120,000 individuals donating 10, 25, 50, 100, whatever they could afford. It's a record for any statewide. 120,000 is a lot of people, right? And that's why I so deeply appreciate you being here, right? That I just totally depended on that. That's the way I like to run my operation. It's grassroots focused. I don't feel beholden to anybody. And that is a very freeing feeling, when you're a governor, that treat everybody the same, center the people, but I don't feel beholden. I don't ask for it. And that's only because you all step up and help me out. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that support and happy to take a couple questions. Thanks so much, everybody. Really, really.
After the environment, but it'd be great for affordability.
It'd be great for affordability. The problem is it really blows a hole in our budget. I mean, as you know, if this is what's... So, first important question. But let me sort of take a half step back. In Washington, as Matt knows, in Washington State, we have different budgets. So like we have a shortfall in our operating budget, to be clear, right? That's where you read about the shortfall that impacts what we can fund. We also have different budgets, capital and transportation. The challenge with our transportation budget, while it's healthy-ish, the challenge is it's very dependent on the gas tax. That's just the way our system has been, and folks here could probably give a better reason why that is, but that's been the case for a long, long time. Well, of course, we have more and more people who are hopefully giving up their gas vehicles and going electric. That's wonderful for our environment, I encourage that, but it has an impact on our budget because fewer people are paying for gas. So we have challenges right now in that budget. So we've looked at this idea of whether we could do that, but then now you're jeopardizing these projects that we're talking about, right? That work that's really important. So it's difficult. If we had a healthier budget, it's decent, great, we have more flexibility, but I think it'd be difficult for us. I think I'm aware of one governor maybe who's doing that. I'm not sure if there's any more than that. And other governors will be facing the same challenge. Thanks for that question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have the next one.
Yes, go for it. Yeah.
Sahar, and everybody thinks I'm Sahar, and I'm your policy director, so I have to.
Yes,
every day.
different Sahar, yes.
Different Sahar,
Sahar.
yes. But I wanted to ask about our bond rating, and we were the 50th, and so what do you think your office and the legislature should do to address that challenge?
Yeah, well, our bond rating is actually AAA. So our Moody's rating says AAA in our bond rating.
Right.
Bond rating is very important. We go out to bond like those transportation projects. We get a reduced rate, right? When we go to do that, we save money because we literally have the highest. There's like, I might be off, I think there's like 14 states that have a AAA bond rating. We're one of those. Maybe it's 12, maybe it's 15. You get the idea. It's in that range. And some states have a much lower bond rate, just to be clear. So, and we've had AAA bond rating for a long time. I was on the King County Council before being Attorney General and Governor, AAA bond rating there. We took that very seriously to maintain that because we know how important that is for our fiscal stability and because it saves us money, it saves you money. So what happened is Moody's gave what they call, I think, called a negative outlook. We still have a AAA bond rating, I want to be very clear, but they've said, and I can't blame them, you know, we had a $16 billion budget shortfall when I walked into office a year and 3 months ago, and we have to balance our budget. We're not like the federal government where we can go in debt. We had cuts, billions in cuts, billions in revenue, and in trying to balance that budget, they're saying, hey, we're worried about the future here for Washington State. So what they're saying is, hey, they're giving us some time to try and essentially make sure we continue to right the ship on our budget. I support that. You'll see a budget from me that I propose this year that does that. So just want to be clear, we have a AAA bond rating. So negative outlook is not a good thing, but consider it like like a warning light on your car, check oil or something, right? Your oil's not going to run out, but you need to go get it checked out. So I'm confident that with the legislature, you know, I don't want to say I'm not worried about losing a AAA bond rating. That's not correct at all. But what I would say is that certainly has my attention. Our state treasurer is a guy named Mike Pleciotti. I talk to Mike all the time. We're very close. So I'm very familiar. A year ago I met with Moody's when they did, and others would do ratings. I would join those calls to talk about it as new governor because I know how important that is. But our job is to make sure we're right-sizing our budget, and that's going to be a challenge this year. We're going to have more budget challenges this year. That's not going to be easy. I talk to people every day who are upset because, hey, something got cut from the budget. I understand that, right, that frustration. I also talk to people who are frustrated by taxes being increased. I understand that as well. There's no perfect solution to it, but protecting that AAA bond rating is important to us. But to be clear, we have AAA bond rating, no state is higher, and our absolute goal is to maintain that.
I think we have time.
Time, one more. Okay, Catherine's got one. So, yeah.
So hello,
Yes.
Julie Kang,
Good to see you.
educator,
Yes.
and you're committed to education,
Yes.
public education. We're not getting enough funding for public education, and those who can send their kids to private schools are doing that. What can we do for our children future?
Well, when it comes to education, I mean, we do have to put everything, what everyone's asking about, in the context of a budget reality. Just be perfectly clear, right? So I can't print money, I can't go into debt, I can't borrow, we're not the federal government. We have to balance at the end. And so what I will say is my first year, we cut, I want to say about $8 billion from the budget. Despite that, we added $1 billion to special education in our budget, a record investment. Everybody else is getting cut. On K through 12, we actually added to it. I actually met yesterday or the day before with about 60 or 70 or 80 rural superintendents. and made that point to them. They had the same question. I said, hey, just put this in perspective. The one thing we went big on that year, everything else was getting cut, had raised taxes, was K through 12, and specifically special education, which needs even more than that. That's number two. Last year, look, everybody's going to be experiencing some pain here. No one is immune to that. But it represents well over 40% of our entire operating budget. Okay, so just to be clear, right, we do a lot of things as a state, but the biggest expenditure, 44%, something like that, is K through 12 education. Roger's nodding, so I know I'm close on that. And that is important. And so look, I can't promise the future. We watch closely what the revenue forecast. We get another one, I think, next month, if I recall correctly, another one like in September, another one in December. And I have to operate within a budget reality. But I can assure you that I think it's fair with the legislature as well, that by any fair measure, despite a really challenging time, we have prioritized that. That doesn't mean we're not looking for efficiencies across the board. We simply have to do that. But that is something that, as a son of a school teacher, that is deeply important to me. But not to end on a sort of a bit of a downer, but it is a budget reality. We have to. I was reading an article, it was like a New York Times article, and once in a while if I ever feel sorry for myself because I inherited a pretty big budget challenge, I try not to too much. But I read an article where the columnist was saying, hey, a good politician doesn't complain about the hand they're dealt. They deal the hand they're dealt and find solutions for the hand they're dealt. So as an example, the Ballmer Group is donating over a course of 10 years up to $1 billion for early education, right? That's the kind of thing we need, right? That's the kind of thing we need to be doing, find creative ways to get through a really, really challenging situation. And so that's where I try to focus, right? And maybe the last thought I'll leave you with on this, because it's a really important subject, this is specifically in the budget in general, is if there's a lot of people in this room, if there's 60 people in this room, right? I guarantee you, if you were in my seat, and you had all the briefings I had about the budget, and all the different ideas the team brings me what to do, revenue, cuts, this, that, the other, I 100% guarantee you, and this is a room that pretty much ideologically share values, right? You would come up with 60 different ways to balance that budget. Guarantee it, beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I guarantee you there'd be radically different approaches within the 60 people. I guarantee that as well. That's the nature of it. But what I can say, what guides me is making sure that we're prioritizing our values. I mentioned the Planned Parenthood example. I mentioned the special education example, right? To folks that do we can to be efficient, streamline our processes. I can control that, right? That makes our system work a little bit better. And try and be thoughtful when we do have to make cuts, be thoughtful about that. There's no easy cuts, but be thoughtful about that to make sure we're doing right by the people. So with that, I think I might turn this back to Julie. So thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Julie for a final few words. Appreciate all being here so much. Also appreciate understanding in a few minutes I'll slip out to throw fastballs and catch my daughter's fastballs in a few minutes. So thanks again for being here, everybody. Here's Julie. Yeah.
I also want to recognize our legislators and elected officials here. So we have Representative Roger Goodman from the 45th.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger.
And Representative Janice Don from the 41st. And Newcastle Council Member Sam Burford. And Redmond Council Member Vivek Pregnia. So I'm so proud to support Bob Ferguson because he stands up for all of us time and time again. He stands up for our rights, for our immigrant communities, for our healthcare, for our education, and for our environment and our future. So there are 3 points I'd like to share for this final ask. So, Bob mentioned that he does not take any corporate PAC money. So this is what that means. So instead of quickly getting a $4,800 maximum check from a corporate PAC, he relies on individuals, like all of us here, to make donations. And number 2, there's a session freeze. For about half the year, statewide officials, like Bob, are prohibited from raising a dollar due to the legislative session fundraising freeze. So it starts about a month before the session and lasts until the session ends. That means it's crucial when he can raise funds that he be able to do that and that we be there to support him. So the third thing is 100% participation. As Bob mentioned, he was elected governor with an unprecedented 120,000 individual donations. So that takes a lot of time and energy to build that grassroots effort of that size. So he needs our help now to build the grassroots campaign that he needs to continue to be successful and to stand up for Washingtonians. So we're asking for 100% participation from all of you today. Anything from $50 to maximum of $4,800. So please make a donation today. And Catherine Bachman is here with envelopes and QR codes. Thank you for being here today to support our Governor Bob Ferguson. Enjoy the art.